Good afternoon and welcome to Forecast for You. Today is June 2nd and we will look at the forecast on US dollar index. But first, let's start with the definition. The US dollar index is a measure of the value of the US dollar relative to the value of basket of the main currencies, such as euro with the percentage of 58, Japanese yen almost 14%, GBP 12%, Canadian dollar 9%, Swedish krona 4%, and Swiss franc with less than 4%. How important is the US dollar index? Well, it shows the relative strength of the American dollar. Therefore, with its rise, the other currencies kind of lose their value to the US dollar. This also applies to the ruble. Historical US dollar index range is between 80 and 130 points. Currently it is at around 100, so according to the historical value it is neither too low nor too high. It affects the price of everything that is denominated in US dollars, such as oil, crude, gold, etc. If you look at the historical graph, you will see gray vertical lines, which show when the economy is in a recession. As a general rule, US dollar, in fact the US dollar index, often rises during these recessions. To forecast the US dollar index, we applied four kinds of forecasts: cyclical analysis, the same with forward, as well as dynamic model and short-term forecast, both made using neural network. As a benchmark data, we took information for the past 50 years since 1970s, daily prices, and as information source, financeyahoo.com. So what we see on the classical version of cyclical analysis. For those of you who don't watch as often, this graph is presented with a vertical line which symbolizes present. Therefore, the future is marked as purple and the past as white. Historical data on changes of the US dollar index is represented by candles. The sine waves shows the cyclical analysis itself, so we can see the relationship between the cycles and the actual price changes. When the price goes up, so does the cycle phase, with a direct correlation. Sometimes it does much, sometimes it doesn't. However, there is a consistent pattern. Currently, we are in the lower phase of the cycle. Therefore, after the lower phase of the cycle, the growth phase begins. This means that we assume that according to this forecast, US dollar index will start to grow soon. Usually, when it begins to rise, the currencies that are included in the measurement of this index, such as yen, euro, as well as ruble, begin to lose their value to the dollar. Let's look at the other types of forecast and compare the results. Classical cyclical, complemented by forward analysis, is the advanced version of conventional cyclical analysis. It is more sensitive, showing more subtle changes. Therefore, this forecast is preferable for the traders who choose to work in short time frames, while long-term investors can limit themselves with the classical cyclical analysis. Here as well, we can see that we are currently almost at the lowest point from which the US dollar index supposedly is going to start growing approximately until the mid-June. Then some weakening, followed by another phase of slight growth, then weakening again, growth, and so on. The peak is supposedly expected in the area of mid-July. Afterwards, the second half of the year, this forecast promises us a decline in the US dollar index. Of course, the decline will be non-linear and will follow the wave pattern, as you can see here. This long-term forecast was made using a dynamic neural network. It indicates the entry and exit points of the given tool. On this graph, we see that the point of entry is forecasted on June 12, with the goal of leaving on July 2nd. It is expected that the US dollar index will be growing for this time interval. This, to some extent, agrees with the cyclical analysis. As you can see, the growth phase is expected, followed by a phase of a decline. The next point of entry for the long positions on the US dollar index is expected to be around mid-July. Now let's move on to the forecast made using the neural network for a short period of time. What can we see here? We see the entry point on June 2nd for the US dollar index purchase. This neural network expects the index to grow. Keep in mind that this short-term forecast using the neural network is most relevant for the first 2 to 3 weeks. Now let's move on to the consensus forecast, which looks as follows. For the first half of June, 3 out of 4 forecasts tell us to buy, while one forecast shows us a small sale or a holding position. In other words, there is no explicit signal to buy. And so the consensus forecast is to buy. Reliability of such forecast is average, since 1 out of 4 isn't sure that there will be a growth phase. In the second half of June, forecasts split. Cyclical and cyclical forward analysis both tell us to sell, while neural networks tell us the opposite. Therefore, there is no consensus and no reliability. Thus, we don't recommend you to use this forecast for this period of time. In the first half of July, we see that 2 out of 3 forecasts tell us to buy, but the reliability of such a forecast is low, since we see that not all forecasts show the same, and this period is quite far in the future, which makes it less accurate as such. And the second half of July, we see again a mixed picture of 2 out of 3 forecasts telling us to buy and 1 to sell. The consensus indicator is still a purchase. However, the reliability of such is pretty low. I would like to note that since the US dollar index has an influence on the dollar-ruble rate, we can confirm the forecast for the growth of the dollar against ruble for the foreseeable future, and this forecast is confirmed as we can see the reversal signals of dollar indices. We expect the strengthening of the US dollar index and therefore decline in ruble against the dollar and the rise of the currency pair dollar-ruble. That's all for today. Like and subscribe to our channel, visit our website forecastforyou.com, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Good luck and high profit to everyone!